Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Mindshifters Radio with your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeannie. Michael and Jeannie share with you the wisdom of the ancient Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. They offer tools and support 5 days a week. They will support you in building a solid foundation within yourself to live in pure love. In Aramaic, Rakhma. Michael is the author of So Why Is This Happening to Me Again? For more information on Michael and Jeannie, please visit www.whyagain.com. And now your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce.
To the brightness within you, and the truth that is rooted within me.
Hi, and welcome to Mindshifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. Our call-in number is 646-200-4169. Press 1. That puts you in queue to talk to Michael. And welcome to our second Aramaic Friday with Dr. Dale Hoffman, and he is on the air. Hey, Dale.
Hi, how you doing, Jeannie? I didn't know I was a doctor, though. That sounds pretty cool, though.
I just thought I'd throw that in for you.
No, I like it. It sounds good, actually.
Yeah, you're definitely at that level of knowledge, though your study's been self, and I'd love to support you getting that designation because you certainly deserve it with what you're doing.
Thank you very much. And I'm on a good line this week. I'm not calling in on a cell phone in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. Well, I'm in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, but I'm on an actual phone now, so I won't be dropping away.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. I think last year's show was fabulous, and I look forward to seeing what's going to unfold today with the conversation about the Aramaic. For those who might be new to the show and new to Dale Hoffman, Dale's a young man who lives in Asheville, North Carolina, travels all over the country and all over the globe, learning and teaching about the Aramaic language and the nuances of the Aramaic language, especially in terms of spiritual process, and is becoming quite a master at supporting people in being enlivened in their human lives. One of our goals here is to bring an end to the state of war on planet Earth, one of the stated goals of our radio show, and the way that we intend to support you in doing that, and we ask you to support us in doing it, is that we each learn to take responsibility for what's going on inside of us instead of blaming someone else if we're in some form of turmoil or pain or anger or rage or fear, that we literally take responsibility and learn forgiveness. And not the kind of forgiveness that the Greeks taught us, that we're going to let somebody else off the hook, because of what's happening inside of us, but rather to literally learn how to reach beyond our normal awareness into the part of the mind that's hidden, that keeps us locked out of what never belonged. Jeannie has just put a link on our website, but she's working on putting a link on for a video on YouTube, KONY space 2012. Jump on YouTube and have a look at that when we finish the show, and join the effort there. This man, Coney, there are some filmmakers. There's a filmmaker who learned of some of the atrocities. This is an issue we've been involved with for several years as child soldiers, and we actually for quite some time were members of an organization that unfortunately, because of economic times, has folded, but we're about putting an end to child soldiering on the planet, and this young man has created a video as a filmmaker to work with the 30,000 children who've been forced to mutilate other children, to murder their own parents. They've been kidnapped and forced to kill people. And, just part of the insanity. And, of course, if that brings some sort of pain or turmoil or sadness or grief up for you, then what we invite you to do is to sit with worksheets, watch that video. This is going to be an important part of healing war on planet Earth. Because when we're structured with hostility, rage, fear, and grief over atrocities, we become, on an energetic level, contributors to those atrocities. When we choose to go inside of ourselves and remove the hostile or fearful contribution that we might have to an atrocity, we then bring the presence of our human lives. And, of course, our definition of a human life is just hold a newborn child. You know exactly what it is. And so we invite you to watch that video and be part of cleaning up war on planet Earth. And this man who's committing these atrocities, if people stand in rage and hatred of him, then there'll be more atrocity, guaranteed. If people stand as a space of love, which doesn't mean you don't hold the person accountable who's committing the atrocities, but you bring a healed self to an atrocity and you become a healer of the atrocity. Bring a pained self to an atrocity and you become one that adds to that atrocity energetically. In the Aramaic, which my take, and we'll put this question to Dale, is that the Aramaic language is a physics language. It describes perfectly how the world of energy works. And when Yeshua says a little leavening leavens the whole loaf, what he's saying is that we as humanity, when we bring enough human lives to bear on a situation, will transform that situation. And so as we become the leavening, bringing the healed mind to the insanities of the world, we become healers of those insanities. So, Dale, if we use that as a kickoff point, and, of course, the forgiveness process, if you go to our website, whyagain.com, on the right-hand side there's a link that says download worksheets. Click into that. The first 7 links will give you the whole forgiveness story. But, Dale, from your studies in the Aramaic, how would you view what I've just said about bringing the healed being to the atrocity and therefore becoming part of the healing process? How would that look from your perspective in the Aramaic?
You know, it's interesting how sort of also you had said about, Aramaic being a physics language. It's an interesting language in that, especially in the ancient Aramaic, as opposed to what we have today, how it was, a lot of people called it sort of a backwater language. A lot of Jews at the time, especially up in what you could almost call the hierarchy of the upper echelon of within Judaism at the time, they called it the pig language or the language of the swine, because they said it was such a they were speaking more about the people than the language itself. The thing about Aramaic is that it's crystal clear. I mentioned last week that if you learn what a certain sound sounds like oo or ta or huh or different sounds, if you learn the actual what each sound means, and you hear a word like ha'iman uta, and you know what those 4 phonetic sounds mean, you have the building blocks that actually create the language. And it was very psychological. It was very, when you speak of physics, and it's amazing how you look at a lot of Yeshua's teachings in his language, in Aramaic. It could be sort of almost elusive and beautifully poetic in the King James, and that's fine. But when you look at that in his native language of Aramaic, and you look at what each of those phonetics are that build the words, and then the words that build the sentences that he was speaking, or at least what was written of him speaking, it actually has the how-tos embedded within it, which is something that's really it's really profound. Like when he said, love your enemies, there's not really a word for enemy in ancient Aramaic. A lot of people, we just don't know that today. But he said, achebu laboiled bubaikun. And chuba, we're talking about literally the chub sound means to create a spark, to almost knock 2 sticks or rocks together to create a spark. And the u sound is to, literally it means action. In other words, like fan the flame. And I'd love to hear you add in with chuba after I'm finished with the sentence, but and then it goes on to say that leboiled bubaikun doesn't mean enemy. What it actually means, the bol sound that's in the middle of that, it literally means to constrict or to cut off from, to stop breathing. It literally, so what he was actually saying was create a spark, fan the flame with those that you literally stop breathing when you're in their presence or when they come up into your consciousness, which is exactly like when he says, Detrakim lekerabak agnapshak, love your neighbor as yourself. Neighbor, kerub, means anybody that you think about. Really, it means any object of your attention, including a chair that you would stub your toe on it in the middle of the night in the dark. but love anyone you think about as yourself. Now, the word self, of course, is napsha. Literal black and white translation without any coloring is breath of life. Literally, love anyone you think about as the breath of your own life. Why? Because they are the breath of your own life. Because there is only ruha, that holy breath. And I'd love to hear you expand with Kuba, because that, for me, when I started with the Aramaic, there were certain insights that really put roots down for me. And there were certain words. Rakhma, to me, today is still that word that when I just saying the word, it puts me into a specific state of being that I don't have words for necessarily, but I don't think we're going to have a problem talking for an hour. So
no, this could be 10 hours, but and we'll continue the conversation next week for sure. But in out of the enlightenment book, that Kuba sound is a filter over the perceptual part of the mind. So when we have this active spark of human life, and this is, if you look, there are two filters that work together that in Aramaic were called perfect love. One was Rakhma, one was Kuba, and Rakhma being a filter over intention, frontal lobes of the brain, Kuba being a filter over perception, that you maintain that condition within yourself, those two filters. And I think an accurate expanded translation would be, now you have the gateway open for human life to enter your form. You will continue the spark of life, the breath. And when you have that, if you maintain Rakhma and Kuba, then you will have not only goals that are based in love toward your neighbor, but you'll maintain your human life. So as opposed to so much loving neighbor as self, it's loving, or Rakhma. And it's interesting, we're sitting here talking about Rakhma, and we're in a parking lot, a Burger King parking lot, and there's a gentleman who just went by with a long white beard, and he's carrying a cane. Our front license plate on our car is Rakhma. And then this fellow just stopped and did a double take looking at Rakhma on the front of our car, which is kind of fun that we're talking about that. So the first law being upon which all the law and the prophets hang. In other words, if you don't get this one, you can't understand the law and the prophets, because you'll try to interpret it through your carbon-based memory system rather than through the presence of love. And it's interesting, the gentleman that I was just speaking about just walked up to our door, and okay. Well, give me just 1 second here. Yeah.
Okay.
I said I'm talking to the gentleman who did a double take on Rakhma on the front of our car. He's come up to the window of the car, and I'm actually doing a radio show right now, and I was just talking about the double take that you did when you stopped to look at our license plate and wondering what it meant. Uh-huh. All right. All right. Are you going to be around for a little while? Okay. We're just chatting with a gentleman who stopped to look, and he's hungry and looking for some support for some food. So Gene's going to take care of that while I continue with Rakhma. And so when I maintain that spark of life, I literally have a gateway, as I've come to understand it, working with the idea of Rakhma for the last 25 years, is not only the filter over intentions, but it is the gateway for human life to enter into our world. And the reason why we can't understand the law and the prophets without it is because we don't have a human life through which to understand it. And so men make up sophisticated languages, as you said, Dale, the more recent Aramaic and the Aramaic of the leaders in the temple and such. The element of sophistry was added, and sophistry means telling a lie and making the lie look true. And when we go into sophisticated languages, we go into languages that keep us away from the truth. And that's why that language was shunned and was spurned, because, hey, we can't control these people if they know truth. We can only control them if they lose this condition called Rakhma. So let's disappear the real meanings and put people into an intellectual state where they now become controllable. And so these two filters together become the gateway and the way to maintain a human life. How does that fit for you?
You know, it's what's fascinating that's got me thinking about two phrases. One is Matthew 27:51, and the other is John 10:9. Matthew 27:51. Of course, it says the veil in the King James. It says the veil of the temple was rent in twain from top to bottom. If you look at that in Aramaic, it says the veil, which actually means the word is ape. Ape means not just veil or covering, but it's that word when Yeshua would say that in which you judge another you are guilty of practicing, and he called them a hypocrite. That's the word ape, which means veil. It also means persona, which of course means mask, coming from Latin. And it doesn't just say, though, that the veil of the temple was rent in twain. When you look at it in Aramaic, it literally says ape taria, the haikla. It literally says the veil in the portal or the gateway or the doorway of the temple, literally. And in John 10:9, when we have that phrase, I am the gate, if anyone enters through me, he shall be saved, shall go in and out and find pasture. If you look at John 10:9, it actually says inana. Ina means I, in other words, I, Jesus, but he said ina, which is inana in Aramaic, which means the eye inside of the eye within the eye, is the portal, gatekeeper, or doorway, and if anyone enters through this portal, they will literally not be saved, but awaken to the presence energy of life and self and discover the fertile field, not just pasture that we think of cows, but literally in Aramaic it says find the fertile field or awaken the fertile field. And we've got that same word, taria, which is doorway, portal, gatekeeper. There's so many different ways you can translate that. It's amazing how that was totally, completely lost in the King James. In the Aramaic, it was almost the most important phrase in the entire sentence, or the most important word.
Well, let's throw another perspective on it, because when they were talking about the temple, they weren't talking about a building and a purple curtain in a church being torn in two. The temple is your own temple, your own physiology, and the veil is the gate that's been built by closing down the breath, and it's the gateway between the subconscious and the unconscious mind. And if we don't ever open that gateway, then we are defined by and run by our unconscious dynamics, or the state of denial and dissociation produces a withholding of the breath that creates this veil that closes over this portal, which until it's opened, people are totally run by what's going on in the unconscious mind.
Yeah, and I got to be real clear. So when I say that word temple, that I'm not speaking about a building. It's funny to see it in a movie how a curtain in the doorway rips open. That's really cute and all, but that word in Aramaic is haikla. Haikla, literally, the word haya means energy. La means something gathered in one place, a gathering of energy. It's the word, when he talked about body, temple, it's the word for church or sanctuary, and it literally means an embodiment or gathering of energy. Literally, linguistically, it means a gathering of energy. The veil and the portal of the gathering or embodiment of energy was torn in half, and look at that. It's 100% perfectly clear in his language. Of course, in ours, it sounds nice and poetic, but we've lost the meaning entirely. Of course, especially when we're talking about a building versus the human energy system.
Well, and my take is that a human being, an actual human, is not designed to have an unconscious mind. There should be no veil. There should be no barrier. And that barrier is built with the breath, which is why in the Pentecostal experience it didn't say Yeshua breathed on them, as the Greeks would translate. As a sophisticated language would tell us, the language where lies look true, that what happens there is, it says in the Aramaic, as we've discussed before, Dale, that, he breathed to them. He showed them how to open the veil of their temple, and all these awesome things, including this light above their heads, began to open for them because they had we're able to move into another energetic state, the natural energetic state of a human being that is totally without an unconscious mind, totally able to contact everything within them, every conflict, every dissociated thought, able to clean it out, and it creates a spark, an enlivening energy that takes us to a whole other level. And those who would like to control us don't want us to know that that's possible, so they make sophisticated languages. And if you look, the sophists were a group of Greek philosophers who traveled around Greece teaching the children of the wealthy how to lie and make their lies look true. And what runs the world today is sophistry. I've asked the question of thousands of people over the years who have college degrees, how many know what you were being trained in? And they go, what do you mean? It's, well, when you went to school, you started out and you were what? You were a freshman, and then you became a junior. A junior what? And I've only ever had one person who knew how to answer this question. And most people, or everybody looks at me and goes, junior what? What do you mean, junior what? Well, and then you were a senior, right? A senior what? Well, I don't know. What are you talking about? I've never met anybody except this one person last year in Branson, Missouri that I was speaking with, an older gentleman. I've never met one person who's got a college degree that knows what they were being trained in. If you go back and look historically, and I'm just reporting the news, this can be disturbing for people when they realize what they've been trained in, but it shows them, what they need to clean up in themselves. But that word sophistry is what follows the junior and the senior. So you were a sophomore, you were a junior sophister, a senior sophister. And now you're ready to go out and be part of the system that lies to people and makes people believe your lies. That's the whole sophisticated game, and that's what runs our whole culture, and that's why, there's a bishop named Rakhma who back in the 6th century did everything he could to destroy every Aramaic Bible he could find. The sophisticates want us to get rid of everything that never belonged in, or that would teach us how to live a true human life rather than live out of the insanity of hostility and fear and sophisticated minds. Why can't somebody get a job in a big corporation if they don't have a degree? It's got nothing to do with the degree. Jeannie used to work at a drug company, and they'd have people who'd be out there selling drugs, educating doctors how to use drugs, and the degree that they had was a degree in, guess what? Flower arranging. That's how they were trained, and they were acceptable. Why? Because they've been trained in sophistry, not because of their degree in flower arranging. That didn't enable them or empower them to sell drugs, but their sophistry allowed them to engage in the game that the root of the word pharmacy, if you take a look, is totally and completely been changed and lost in our culture. And that's the game of language, just break down the word spelling. What is spelling? It's to put someone under a spell. Words put people under a spell. Forgiveness removes them from the spell. Actual forgiveness.
In is it John 20:22, I think, with he breathed on them and said, "Receive ye the Holy Ghost." It's unfortunate that in modern Syriac, which is obviously it's come out of, well, I shouldn't say obviously, most don't know that, it's come out of Aramaic. Today, there's different prefix sounds. La and ba are the two most common. The la sound, lamed, and bait, which is the second letter, ba. And today, those two are basically interchangeable in the language, in that you can start something with lahun, bahun, and it means basically the same thing, which could be on, toward, at, within, through, from within. Unfortunately, though, that's not what it actually said. If you look in the ancient Aramaic, before things were twisted, you're speaking of becoming more sophisticated, before they started to be twisted and misunderstood, maybe intentionally manipulated to be a little bit smarter, I put that in quotes, those two were very distinctly different. The la sound, in other words, in John 20:22, if it said napak lahun, it would mean that he breathed on them, toward them, or at them in ancient Aramaic, but it doesn't say that. It actually says napak bahun, not la, but ba, the B sound. And when you put that in there, it literally means with, from within, or through. He breathed them through. He breathed with them. Or literally, he breathed them. Or he breathed, even you could say, from within. I don't know that one would apply necessarily, but although that's where the breath process is happening. And if someone who's not versed in the ancient Aramaic, they'll look at that in modern Syriac and they don't see the issue. But if you go back to the oldest sources that we have, it was so clear. It was so incredibly clear, and those two sounds were distinct. They became sort of mashed together, and a lot of Yeshua's teachings from language to language to language, like I say, they sound really nice and poetic, and they sound really beautiful and pretty, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what was actually there in the first place. I don't really knock Bibles per se, but I do tell people, look, if there's one I say try to steer clear of, it would be the NIV, the New International, which I've been speaking about for like 15 years, and I say here's the reason. They retool that every 4 to 5 years to be more in line with their current political philosophies and beliefs. Now, I'm not saying they go back to the earliest manuscripts and get as high fidelity as they possibly can, but it literally gets skewed a little. And at the Southern Baptist Convention this year, just a few weeks ago, finally, some people stood up and said, we really need to stop supporting this book because it's run so far amok from what at least what they know as originally there, and they were trying to pressure certain booksellers into not selling it. And the booksellers are like, we don't want to necessarily censor this, but we're not going to recommend it either. But there's over 3,750 Bibles on the market in the U.S. today. In order to get any edition copywritten through the U.S. Copyright Office, you have to have 22% unique unto your edition that's different from any other one out there. Now, that's a scary thought. Which one's the inerrant word of God? If yours has to be at least 22% different than all the others. Isn't that a creepy kind of a thought?
Definitely bizarre, and I did some research recently because you hear Yeshua in many cases saying, fear not. And I don't remember exactly how the numbers came out, which is a while ago, but in the King James, the fear not comes through, I don't know, something like 75 times. In the NIV, it was 2 or 3 times. That idea of fear not's been disappeared because the whole theology has been based in fear. Keep people in fear.
It's interesting how the word fear, if you're looking at it in Hebrew, tadkal, which is basically the same as in Aramaic, it doesn't mean fear in the way that we're thinking. Not fear not, but when it's speaking of fear God, people say you're supposed to fear God. That word tadkal, what it means is literally, as an example, if I were to walk into an alleyway and something goes crack, and all of a sudden I'm just very, very aware, or an even better example would be a mother, and the child is about to cancel the thought, run out in front of a car, and the mother goes running for that child, and she grabs that child and pulls that child back, has that massive adrenaline rush. Or you'll hear about a woman or a small person lifting a car to let someone out from underneath, whether it's a child or a friend, whatever. Now, the way I explain it to people is tadkal is what's the initial feeling that someone's having when that adrenaline rush is happening. That's more accurately what tadkal is. The fear sets in is that thing that happens after, like, what could have happened, what's the possibilities here, and then we start talking about the fear filter, of course, when we're talking about forgiveness. People confuse that it's saying fear God, be afraid of God. No, it's saying literally fire on all cylinders for God, to be 100% completely wide open with that perception, that presence of God, it's like if you start to make that into a fear thing, of course, man, that sure sounds like a manipulation to me from someone who's trying to control people, of course, here on earth with the promise of some sort of a future hell or a future heaven. But of course, that whole heaven and hell thing as something after life didn't pop up until several centuries after Yeshua had already made the transition from this planet on that cross, resurrection aside. Kind of funny how that kind of stuff pops up later and people take it in and think that it's something that was there in the original philosophy. And, of course, you're not for almost 2,000 years, we weren't allowed to see what the original philosophy was until the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi, and these beautiful family texts that had been kept, the Peshitta, the Khabbaras, that had been kept in the family archives for 1,700 years before people ever realized, hey, guess what? These are really old. They're a lot older than the King James, which was just the 17th century.
Yeah, and I've heard people who put out this fear not thing, and then when they're confronted and said that's not what it says, they go, well, no, but that's not what I meant either. I didn't mean fear. I meant it's in the Aramaic, have awe for God, have that, as you say, firing on all cylinders, and I think, well, yeah, but that's what I meant. It's like, well, knowing that you're following the teachings of a man who said the power of life and death is in your words, why would you use a word that's totally and completely inaccurate and say you mean something else when you're confronted? And, of course, the only reason is because what we need is all the hostility and fear we can get, because that's how you keep people under control.
Was it Karl Marx that said something along those lines about sort of messing with our understanding of our own language? Great way to control people, isn't it?
Yep, change the meaning of the word to destroy a culture.
Whew.
And that's the game. That's the game of the sophist. You can't teach people truth and control them at the same time. They're totally incompatible. That's why Yeshua said, know the truth will set you free. And, of course, if you've been brainwashed with something that is not true, the only way out of that insanity is the forgiveness process. And forgiveness being the tool with which you go inside yourself and change the content of your mind, put an end to the insane and the hostility and fear-based content that destroys human life, and be restored to your human life.
Mm. A lot of people I know don't even know what that means, human life. It's unfortunate. It's amazing. I just did I had the events in Frederick, Maryland last week, and the week before that was Raleigh, North Carolina, and with the still point breathing, I just said something in passing before we actually started the first session in the morning. I said, it's going to be something that will be completely unmistakable to you. You'll be able to look around this room, and you'll be able to see who did and did not breathe this morning versus the ones who are going to be doing it this afternoon. And it's a really, it's amazing when that happens. The one word that I heard more than any other was glowing. I mean, that's literally Haikla. That's when Yeshua speaks of the body temple and the energy, and he's literally talking about that. That's the true essence, and that's when Rakhma is just absolutely surging forward. And I'll ask people afterward, I'll say, how do you feel right now? And, they'll sort of mess around with some words, and then ultimately it's always some form of love, of peace, of glowing, of presence. And in the end, a lot of them end up saying, I don't have words for this. Then maybe a lot of what he was teaching had nothing to do with words. Maybe it had to do with words as a pointer, getting you back to actually putting it into practice, because you can, of course, talk about it till you're blue in the face, but until you've actually experienced true forgiveness, and not that letting someone off the hook, but going in and literally removing that root, canceling that root of your own suffering within your own heart. Nothing else, it really doesn't matter. It's almost like everything else is a detail. Whenever I'm asked all the time, what's the most, for me, important thing that I've ever learned in terms of Yeshua's Aramaic teachings, I always say the same thing. I say, if it was not for that bedrock, that base that I had of starting with you at Heartland and truly understanding resonance and triggering and what Aramaic forgiveness really meant, if I didn't have that, I don't really think that a lot of what I was talking about would really be all that important up to this point. And, I say it 1,000 times, but thank you here's another 1,000. So thank you. It's been 17 beautiful years.
Glad to be on the team, and, of course, delighted to have you on our team. And as you speak about that and the experience of watching people in the room and knowing who breathed and who didn't, in the Aramaic, that energy that was visible is what was translated into the tongues of fire. That visible difference was that life was there. Human life, all of a sudden, walked in the room. what an awesome experience when human life walks in the room, when you have a room full of non-human life. And non-human life is that which functions out of hostility and fear. And forgiveness removes the hostility and fear so we can go back to our true human lives. And the breath, the still point breath process is such a powerful key in that whole process. In fact, if you know of anyone who's gone through the deathing process and it was a non-crisis oriented death where people kind of naturally or unnaturally passed, what you find is virtually everyone goes through the still point breathing process before they leave. And I think it's because they intuitively know I need to dump some garbage. And, of course, we don't have to wait to the end of life to dump that garbage. We can do it here. We can do it now. We can do it purposely, consciously, and engage our work and move out of the world that we've been tricked into, the world of sophistry, into the truth about who we are as humans. And that's the spark of life. That's the tongues of fire that were visible.
I was in this weekend in Frederick, Maryland. I was talking about that spot on the worksheet where it says, if I'm in pain, I'm in error. And so there was a couple people that were sort of really having an issue with, how is it that they can do that? And I feel this, and I'm like, let's look at it this way. If someone's death, as an example, causes your pain or your suffering, then as soon as that person makes their transition on the other side of the country, you're immediately going to go into a state of shock or whatever. It's not that. It's the knowledge of that triggers that. And I differentiated between the difference between pain and suffering, because pain is something that, it makes me think of Yogananda. He says, if I can remember it correctly, man has falsely identified himself with the pseudo-soul or ego. When he transfers his sense of identity to his true being, the immortal soul, he discovers that all pain is unreal, and he can no longer even imagine the state of suffering. And people were saying pain, and they were hung up on pain. Of course, the ego is kicking in. They're going, no, can't. And I'm like, all right, let's try to go in the back door here. Let's try the word suffering here. If you're suffering, there is that. Of course, there is a little bit of a difference between pain and suffering. And, of course, it's funny how if I use certain words, people have issues with them, and they're like, oh, you need to change your words. And I'm like, maybe it's not about me changing the words so much as you finding out there's something inside of you that's got the issues with the word that's there. Let's look at what it is. What's the root of your suffering in terms of that? And it's one of those things that for me, I remember that in the beginning, that was the hardest thing for me, was to not even necessarily to acknowledge what I had in myself, but to actually own it and eat it. And, of course, when you're in a group of 2 or 3 dozen people at Heartland and everybody's going through that process simultaneously, it gets pretty intense at times, doesn't it? I mean, I think of it's a pretty intense thing, especially when we're all doing 5 to 10 worksheets a day, us on the support team. It was quite a summer, and it's amazing how you get to the end of those few months, and I got a lump in my throat. My life has never, ever, ever, ever been the same. It was literally a different life before and after going to Heartland, and it's amazing. Once that door opens, it never closes again. You may try to wedge it shut and things like that, but it never closes again. But the only way to keep the door opening is to keep doing the process and keep forgiving and forgiving and forgiving and forgiving, not letting people off the hook, but finding those places inside of yourself that are bringing you pain in resonance to everything that's happening around you, because here's your words coming back at you. If something's happened to you 87 different times with 42 different people, who's the only person that was there every time? And people laugh, but it's so true. It's just absolutely true.
One of the things we've been quoting on the show the last couple of days is Rumi, who's a 13th century mystic, and what Rumi says is that in the presence of love, all pain becomes medicine. When we can actually presence a human life, if one person in the room, when you're at Heartland and, 20 people are laid out on the floor in their stuff, if one person is presencing love, then all the pain that everybody's accessing, bringing back out of the dissociated mind for exposure, begins to dissolve. And it's the dissolution of that pain that happens when the veil of the temple is opened. And when people breathe, when people forgive, that dissociating material comes out of hiding, and we get to move into a new state, the state of an actual human life. And we get to the point where we learn to process ourselves. In this work we define processing as the ability to keep love conscious, active, and present when something less than love comes up. And so if there's one person in the room that's holding the active presence of love, then all the pain that's being surfaced from within the room becomes medicine. It's healing. And that's the process. That's what the whole game of Heartland is about. That's what we're there to do, was to create support for that. And actually, not only at Heartland, we've got 2 intensives coming up here in April in Florida. So we're, for those who might be in Florida, if you want to touch in, we're actually going to be in Boca Raton, Florida, starting on Sunday. We'll do a workshop Sunday afternoon, Monday night, Wednesday night, Friday night, and then we'll do Mind Shifters and Still Point Breathing on Saturday in Boca at a place called the Heart Painter Studio. And then the next week we'll actually be at Unity North in Tampa. We'll be doing 7 days of workshops at Unity North. And then that weekend we'll be in Sarasota doing a 3-day residential workshop, and that 3-day workshop will lead to a post-conference day, a 4th day. It won't be actually residential, but it'll be kind of a mini intensive. And then we're actually heading over to Palm Coast, just south of St. Augustine, where we'll do a 9-day residential Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And then back-to-back, we're going to finish Saturday morning the 14th, and then the evening of the 14th, we'll start a second Why Is This Happening to Me Again? 9-day residential intensive a la Heartland. Yeah, we scheduled that second one. Jeannie's just saying in the background. The first one actually filled up within just a few days of announcing it. So we decided to do a second, and there's still 5 or 6 spaces in that second intensive in April if somebody wants to come do that. And, of course, the 65-day at Heartland, which has 6 different modules. So there's a lot going on. If you want to come and play, learn the tools, go to the website. The archives of the radio show are there. And, Dale, what events have you got coming up? Your website is daleallenhoffman.com. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. We've got a lot of stuff that still has to go on to the site. I'm doing I've got different stuff coming up in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., several events in the D.C. area, Raleigh, Minnesota. I've been sort of hunkering down the last few months, really focusing on challenging myself a lot lately, and seeing if I can find blind spots and biases and things of that nature. And the new, fresh, sort of like, I love, like, with what you do with Why Again, it's like every time I hear it, there's always like a new, fresh perspective, and I'm doing that with everything with me. I'm just digging in as deep as I can possibly get into my own heart and with my own work. And it's, as far as what I've got coming up, though, I've got the Aramaic Healing Circle here in Asheville, which is the third Tuesday of every month in Asheville, North Carolina, which is where I live, at the Center for Spiritual Living. It's a 90-minute thing that we call this particular Aramaic Healing Circle, where I speak a bit about Aramaic forgiveness. There's certain breath work that we do. We sit around a crystal bowl. We do 2 crystal bowl meditations. We intone. Intoning is something that in ancient Aramaic was a lot more common than it is now. In the Near Eastern cultures a couple thousand years ago, they would take a word like, say, Rakhma, and what they would do is drop down or let the hard consonant sounds fall away and focus on the vowel sounds, and would actually speak that sound as in Rama. And when you do that, say, 6 or 7 times, you have a what in their beliefs and what I really believe myself is that you have a very direct, much more direct experience of words, of the Aramaic words of Yeshua, when you actually speak them rather than trying to have the comprehension within your literal mind, but you're actually almost singing them and intoning them, that you can awaken the essence of what that word actually meant. And it's something I've been experimenting with for a little over 10 years now, and it's spectacular. I mean, as an example, we can intone the word love in Aramaic, or in English, and it's, I say to people, how do you feel? They're like, well, it's okay, it's nice. And then you intone Rakhma, and it's something completely different. You can intone, as an example, the English word amen. We know of amen, and you say amen, and it sounds very nice. And I'm like, okay, in Aramaic, ancient Aramaic, it's amen. Sounds really close, main rather than men at the end. So we'll do amen, and then we do amen. And it's amazing how when you hear just that slight shift in what's there in the Aramaic, the actual feel, the vibration of the word itself is completely different. It's like it opens up. And it's an amazing thing that when we do that actually sitting with a crystal bowl for 2 15, 20-minute periods during the circle, and I give basically completely unfiltered, to the best of my ability, teachings from Yeshua's, from the ancient Aramaic manuscripts, and it's a really profound experience where people come in, and this one's not meant for me to go really deep into teaching. It's not the monthly circle's not meant to be something where we're even doing a lot of rolling up of the sleeves in this case. I wanted to do something different where you go in and you come out 90 minutes later and you have the awakening of that presence. And it's meant especially for those people who have never been exposed to this before, and it's a way for them to get in there and get a feeling. And it's not the same as getting in and rolling up your sleeves and doing the work, but to be able to get a feeling, or at least a taste of what those teachings are, coming straight from that vibratory essence of Aramaic, as opposed through translations of translations of translations. And it's just an amazing experience of us sitting in a circle, and it's candlelit, and we have gentle music on in the beginning and at the end. It's a really profound experience that I've been doing the healing circle on and off like that for about 7 years now. At one point, we were doing it at Mystic Journeys bookstore, which is now gone in Asheville, and the last 2 or 3 months we had 50 to 60 people showing up every single Tuesday. So there's something to be said for diving in as opposed to trying to figure it out with your mind. Literally, it's just a cheap replica of actually getting in and doing it and putting yourself in that place. When Yeshua said, pray in my name, it had nothing to do with the name Jesus, Jesus, but it actually had everything to do with that word Shem, Shemach in Aramaic, which means my essence, or all that I am, the totality of my consciousness. So if you pray in the name of Lord Jesus, number one, you're not praying in his name because that wasn't his name, but number two, it didn't mean that anyway. It meant literally stepping inside from the vibration, from this place of presence that I'm speaking to you of, and that presence, that vibration, that was Rakhma that he was talking about. Absolutely uncertain, without any uncertainty whatsoever. That's exactly what he was talking about. And, of course, today, if you just look at it in words, you're not going to get it unless you actually put yourself into the experience of it. It's so incredibly profound. It really is. Am I still here?
And, I don't know if you've touched into the work of a man named Tannen.
Stan, yes, absolutely. Stan Tannen, absolutely. You turned me on to him 17 years ago. Yeah.
Right. And what he's showing is that the Aramaic letters are actually three-dimensional shapes of the atomic structure. So, there's logic and reason behind why that shifting takes place when you intone those, because you're literally setting up the frequency of the atomic structure. That's what the Aramaic letters were, and why the Aramaic words are, I think, such a key. And that intonement, literally, because these are the actual, the letters are designed originally to be 3D. They're actual 3D shapes of different elements in the atomic form. So when you're doing that, you're resonating literally the elements within yourself. And, of course, the ultimate element in Aramaic being Ruka Dekudsha, this elemental force in us that undoes the effects of errors and teaches us the truth. There's this awesome power that if we can tap into it, and that's one of the elemental forces.
I've got so many hours and hours and hours of Stan on DVD. One of the most awesome people for really challenging, one of the most amazing things I've ever seen him do also is he uses the letters, the Hebrew, Aramaic letters to form the RNA, the DNA, helix. He has an amazing letter-by-letter translation of the beginning of the Torah, the book of Genesis, where, let me see if I can actually find that, because that would be something that's amazing for people to hear, where, see, the original Torah, the original book of Genesis, was not actually words that we're used to now. It was actually a stream of run-on letters, and there was no actual space markers or final markers defining words. Say, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That phrase alone could be translated over 350 ways. Adam and Eve was a metaphor for something much deeper. Here it is, I have it. Listen to this. This is a not word-by-word translation from Stan at the beginning of Genesis, but actually letter by letter. Breaking open, inside, outside, rushing, radiating, reaching, all life, shining source light in inner being, itself recurring within itself. Breaking open, inside, outside, rushing, radiating, reaching, all life blooming, kindling, inside lighting, looking open, in without, in inner being, golden flowing, moving outward within itself. All life itself recurring within itself, looking open, in, without, shining source life, inside dividing, in inner being, golden flowing, moving outward within itself, doing, living, co-evolving, all life itself recurring within itself, looking open, in, without, all life rushing, radiating, reaching, treetops, upright, bearing wholeness, carrying light within itself. So here, looking just at the letters, not even the actual words that happened over 1,500 years after the Torah was originally written, look what you've got just looking at the meanings of each of the letters, not even the words themselves. It's amazing. And over you're seeing within itself, within itself, within itself. Profound. His work is awesome. You can go to Meru, MERU.org. He's got videos. He's got all kinds of stuff. Phenomenal hand motions that he teaches people with how to actually show the Hebrew language completely in your hands. Just amazing, amazing work.
Very cool. Well, we're winding down. We're down to about the last 5 minutes or so, 6 minutes. Any Aramaic thought? One of the things that comes forward as you were mentioning the word prayer is that prayer, as opposed to putting order into the cosmic gift catalog in Aramaic, means being the space of love, being the trap for God. You want to throw some thoughts out about that?
When I think of prayer, there's one person that always pops into my mind. It was one of my great mentors of my life, a guy named Ron Roth. Ron made his transition a few years ago, and it was from Ron that I really got the understanding of that Aramaic word prayer. The way Ron was teaching was like nothing to do with the words. It has to do with your state of being. Where are you coming from? And it's amazing how that word prayer in Aramaic, sluta, ta genders it feminine, which means that it's a state of being, something that's an experience rather than something that you can locate in time and space necessarily. But that word sluta in Aramaic means to ensnare or to cup against or set a trap for God. Now, that doesn't mean a trap isn't like a bear trap. There's two ways of looking at that in ancient Aramaic. One way, you are literally holding a vision in your heart, and the rucha, the essence of God, that living, breathing, that elemental force comes through and expands that vision as you hold that in your heart. Or it also means that you're literally putting out an antenna almost. It's like you are 100% completely open, receptive, so that the essence of God, Rucha the Kudsha, can literally expand through you, which is, of course, when it says in the Lord's Prayer, on earth as it is in heaven, it's saying what I really want is I want the true essence of God, the true essence of Allah, the true essence of Ruha to live through me consciously, as opposed to me constantly having this experience of recreating all of this crud in my life, which would be my own stuff. It's saying come from heaven, which is that literally that non-dual being state of who I truly am, as opposed to my stuff. And it's also where it says te te malkuta in the Lord's Prayer. Te means come. Te te means come, but of course malkuta, ta genders the word kingdom, quote unquote, feminine. And what that means is that it's something that comes from within rather than at you. Feminine means that it's an experience rather than a thing itself. In other words, my perception of the desk in front of me is feminine. The desk itself in language is masculine. And when we understand that, the kingdom's not something located in time and space, but it's literally who we are. And when we pray from that vibration, that consciousness, from Rakhma, with Ruha consciously birthing through us, that's what prayer really meant. He never said, say these words. He said, pray in this way or pray in this manner. And what he said, of course, in John 15:16, anything you ask the Father from this consciousness that I am speaking this from, it's yours. It's literally right here in your hand. We've totally lost the meaning of prayer today. We pray for something, and of course when you pray for something, you're acknowledging that you do not have that, and that's what's going to expand in your life. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work backwards.
Well, he gives specific instructions of don't say words like to be heard for much speaking. He's talking about being a space and actually rendering. There's a rendition of the Lord's Prayer on the YAGN site where we lay out that this is an instruction set for achieving living as the active space of the love of God. That's what we're designed to do, and there's nothing mystical about it. If you look down through history, anybody who's ever taken the time out of the world of sophistry, anybody who's ever stepped apart from the world of war and killing people for their property and on and on and on, all that sort of stuff, and taken time to drop down into what's really going on here, they all come up with the same answer. It's about the fact that we live, move, and have our being in this active presence of love. And so the Lord's Prayer, as opposed to, words for people to repeat and repeat, are simply a set of instructions for here's how you become the space that you are designed to be as a human being, as the active presence of love. And so, of course, all of our work is geared to bringing people back to that state where they literally 24/7, 365 live in their human lives as the active presence of love and bring that active presence of love into expression everywhere they turn, especially the place where there is insanity going on, because when the active presence, and it takes a human for this presence to be active in our world, otherwise we have choice. We can stay stuck in our insane dynamics as long as we want, but the minute that we choose to become the active space of love, we've entered into a true state of Aramaic prayer. And one of the keys to doing that is, of course, the process of forgiveness. I can remember being a kid and thinking of, there'll come a time when your whole life will become a prayer. And what that meant to me was hand to knee. It was like, but that we are capable of living as the active presence of love 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
That would have felt like a threat to me when I was a kid, on my knees all day long. No way.
Yeah. Right. And so to really, truly live as that is the instruction set of the Lord's Prayer. It's a how-to, just like the Beatitudes are a how-to. Maybe next Friday.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll touch into the Beatitudes. They're pretty awesome.
Absolutely. It's literally, the Beatitudes, especially the first 7, are a step-by-step process, not theological promises, not at all. Absolutely.
Exactly. Well, we're complete, Dale, so DaleHoffman.com, DaleAllenHoffman.com, YAGN.com. Find out where we are, come and play, have the best year yet of your eternal life. Bring a stranger to the show on Monday. Blessings. Thanks, Dale. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Love you both. All of you.
Okay. Bye-bye.